When you started, then good evening. So tonight, our Montgomery Amateur Radio Club, located here in Montgomery County, Maryland, is pleased to present Sid NH7C, who is going to talk to us about public relations initiatives for amateur radio. And Sid knows what he's talking about, having served on the ARRL National Public Relations Committee, including serving as its national chair. Sid is a member of MARC and has served on the MARC board in the past. His public safety and emergency management career spans over 35 years, including 30 years of federal government service. Sid holds numerous public safety certifications, including professional firefighter, National Registry paramedic, and fire safety inspector. Sid was first licensed as a teenager and is currently an amateur extra, as well as a life member of ARRL. So Sid, thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight, and it's over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with the club, and I know that it's going to be recorded so that others can listen to the presentation and what we talk about. Because we are recording, if some questions come up, if you want to put them in the chat box and then we can talk about them afterwards. I would like to have a conversation at the end and make it more of a conversation than just a lecture. So, and a lot of the information that I'm going to share, especially towards the end, they're just going to be a lot of reminders. The MARC Club does a lot of great things, and there's a lot of great information that gets passed out and shared and discussed, whether it's on calls like this or the regular in-person meetings, and of course the nets, and then the friendly people that are on the repeaters. So that'll be a little review for some, and maybe just some new ideas. So we'll get started here. I will apologize to all that looked at the meeting notice and thought Sid Caesar, the comedian, was going to be here. I'm Sid Caesar, but not that Sid Caesar. And as you can see, I've got a face for radio, a voice for newsprint, and I have trouble with spelling, so I just talk a lot. Just a little bit about me, and I always try to find what I have in common, whether it's with somebody new I meet or somebody I work with. So I've known some of you for coming on 2 decades, and I know a little bit about you, you know a little bit about me, but as I had a situation recently where a coach from high school and someone I went through the fire academy with both passed away. And when I read their obituaries, I was just totally surprised that I knew so little about them. So just a quick intro about myself. Like many of you, I started off as a shortwave listener, and because of being in the federal government, I do have my acronym jar here. So if I don't spell out an acronym or I say an acronym, I'll put $1 in for everyone, and then I'll donate that to the club. So as a shortwave listener, got involved with that. My parents bought some radios after I had some other ones, and then they started seeing all this mail from the USSR and China and Canada and East Germany, and they really wondered what I was getting into. And they were very happy that once I got involved with amateur radio that I wasn't getting so many letters from all those countries, especially when they wanted me to visit. So I have held a lot of call signs, whether they're here in the United States or other countries. I've been very fortunate to travel quite a bit for work and for fun. And everywhere I go, I try to make sure that I've got amateur radio in my bag and ready to operate. I do a lot of contesting. I'm a member of the Potomac Valley Radio Club, PVRC, and have done a lot of work with them, both here in the United States and then for contests outside the United States. One example is when I was at the Olympics in London 2012, I was a guest operator at the special event station, and they had a seat warm for me, and I sat down and made hundreds of contacts with the special event station during the London Olympics. And then when I get around on vacation and things, I've got some other call signs. So I try to stay very busy with amateur radio. I've enjoyed it for many, many years, so I try to keep that going, even today with about 100 contacts on HF today. All right, a little bit about me and what brought me to Washington, D.C. is the National Disaster Medical System, and you're familiar with some of the people that I used to work with: Ross Merlin, Alan Platke, Al Taylor, and even Scott Goldstein, the Montgomery County Fire Chief, all people that I worked with when I was helping out with disasters and before I moved in the 90s and then afterwards. So I started out my public safety career as a police and fire dispatch person with many police departments and EMS, emergency medical services, and fire. I moved on into law enforcement at Oak Brook Terrace Police Department in Illinois, western suburbs of Chicago. Looked for a new direction. I moved to Dayton, Ohio, home of the Hamvention, where I was a firefighter paramedic inspector, Miamisburg, Ohio, just south of Dayton, home of Drake. I also taught at Sinclair College. I was fortunate enough to be involved with the Disaster Medical Assistance Team, OH5, and then the first Urban Search and Rescue, FEMA, Urban Search and Rescue Team in the state of Ohio, Task Force 1. In the 2000s, I moved here, well, actually in 1999, but I spent a lot of time at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, and then the Indian Health Service, Department of Interior. In the 2010s, Department of Interior, then I moved on to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, where my last position before I retired from federal service as the National Chief of Emergency Management, serving over 575 federally recognized tribes throughout the United States. And now I'm in private practice in emergency management with my company, Acarcia. So one of our very nice fall sunsets. All right, as Alex mentioned, I've been a member of the club for quite a while, past board member. I'm also a volunteer examiner. I'm a past public information coordinator for the Maryland section, and also served 6 years on the National Public Relations Committee for the ARRL, with 3 of those years, the last 3 years, being the chair. I like contesting. I like to operate remote bases and stations. APRS, I maintain a APRS digipeater on the top of Maui at Haleakala. I believe that's coming up on 25 years. And Skywarn, that's what got me involved with amateur radio when I was a teen. Oh, wish I had some of these antennas, bring them from New Mexico. That was one of my trips out there. I spent about 4 or 5 hours looking at that and met with some of the folks there. So it's always nice to have a tangential ham radio adventure when I was on some of my activities. A little bit about the ARRL Public Relations Committee. It's a presidentially appointed committee, and their focus is ensuring that the ARRL message gets out to all members, all amateur radio operators, the served agencies, and most importantly, the general public. A couple little known parts of the responsibilities of the Public Relations Committee from ARRL. One is the Mcgann Award, the Silver Antenna Award. This is for promotion of amateur radio to the non-amateur radio community. And that includes activities from public information coordinators, public information officers, whether they're part of the league or not. The other award is the Bill Leonard Award. That's for media, and it was based upon our decided upon with Bill Leonard, W2SKE, and what he did for amateur radio during his career. A flower from my backyard. When I'm thinking about public relations and public information, although these numbers have changed a little bit since September 1st, but I looked at the numbers, and it came up on the reflector last week or so also. The number of technician class hams compared to the rest nationally, when you look at those numbers, more than half of the amateur radio licenses that are out there are technician. I know everybody's not active, but that's a number that has surprised me. It's great, new people coming in because of public service, community emergency response teams, or other interests. So when I think about those numbers, I think about some of the ideas. And during my 6 years on the committee for the ARRL Public Relations Committee, we had many individuals, many clubs, many organizations ask us for some help, consulting, hey, what do you think about this idea? Kick the tires, see if this could go. So when I'm thinking about Mark, I'm thinking about what would be the goals. Right now, like I said earlier, there's so many good things that go on with the club. But what could be some of the goals? Is the club looking for new members? Are you looking for more people to go to the trailer day and to field day and participate on nets, calls like this? Need more people to serve the community as amateur radio operators and provide service? Is it something to do with contesting, or maybe just rag chews like we do on the repeater, or some activity days on other frequencies? Or are you building something like the repeater we talked about earlier? Or is it something where there's a project? All kinds of different things to think about. When thinking about public relations, public information, a lot of people, well, they're afraid. Uh-oh, I've never done that before, or that looks difficult. With some planning, it's not as difficult as it could be. And it is something that, although maybe there's one person or a group of people, perhaps even the board, that are ultimately responsible for public relations and public information sharing from the club, everybody who's a member of the club should be an ambassador. They should have some knowledge. They should know where to find information, because we're an ambassador for our hobby every time we go out. When we're doing field day, when we're out and about and we've got an amateur radio in our car, or we've got our HT, all kinds of different things. So the idea that everybody in the club's got a little part of the public relations and public information output from the club. The idea of what success looks like, and I'm going to go through that in a little bit, it's just important, like other projects, is to try. We helped numerous clubs who said, hey, we're just not getting the right feedback and we're not getting the right output from some of our public relations activities. What can we do? And as I mentioned earlier, it's tough to get started, but once you get started, one foot in front of the other, it's new, and everybody's new at something. This is no different. All right, for those of you that studied journalism in school, you know about the 5 W's, or maybe you heard about it even if you didn't study journalism. But recently, especially with the advent of social media and the number of people who read physical newspapers is down, and perhaps even television watching and habits of the general public have changed because of live streaming and all the different 400 channels on your direct TV or dish TV or your cable. The who, what, why, when, and why. Who, what, where, when, why. Those are all very important, but the why, as anybody who's tried to have a friend become an amateur radio operator, or if you're doing educational activities, the why is really, really important. We are a victim of our own success as the amateur radio community. We are, as a big group, we do well with newsletters and sending emails. We talk a lot about what has happened, not what will happen. And the Mark Club does a good job of what will happen. We had a report earlier in the meeting, and then there's always something on the repeaters and the nets about what's coming up, special events, activities, clubs. So this is something that Mark Club does very, very well. Remember, there are still people out there that do not have a license that you don't know. They could be your neighbor, and that maybe they're listening to you on a scanner. Maybe they've got one of these software-defined radios and they hear the net. Remember to make sure that these people know either a phone number or the email address or some way to contact the club. Repeating the URL for the club website, always very important, so those people can find you on their terms. The other part that seems to be difficult is knowing your audience. And this gets back to the goals that I had mentioned earlier. If the club is looking for new members, for example, it's very important to know the audience. Are you going to go to the fire department and try to find people that work there to become amateur radio operators? Are you going to go someplace where there are a lot of retired people? Are you going to go to a kids club or to a school? The way that you write and the way that you speak has to be planned out, and you really need to change the way that you think about it. I've changed this presentation 3 or 4 times since Al and Alex asked me to do it. But just know that what usually goes into a newsletter does not have enough detail and really lacks the why somebody new could get involved. So you're going to see a pattern here, but some of the things internal to the club. There's a great email reflector. I actually had to go in and take myself off the digest and get every message because there's some really great information that's getting shared on there. It's really good, but that's only open to club members. So others may not see that unless a message is forwarded. Club newsletters. There's a lot of time and effort that gets put into club newsletters, and it's very difficult to measure how many people are reading that. So I've seen over my time in public relations that newsletters come and go as people and available time happens. Sometimes they're great, and sometimes they're not so great. Sometimes something is better than nothing, especially when you think about handouts and additional information non-members of the club or non-hams can use. The club website. I've been asked to evaluate numerous different websites, and I'll be honest, it's very difficult to take the amateur radio glasses off and look at a website and say, hey, that looks good. But some types of considerations, including having a I'm new button or specific pages just for people who are new or people who want to upgrade or people that want to learn how to get involved with the club. Even leadership, how do people get on the board? How do people get to be the president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, things like that? We talk a lot as amateur radio operators, and now that the 24-hour always on information pipeline is there are a lot of people, maybe they work strange hours and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they want to learn about the club. Can they get that information from the website? And then social media. Social media, the double-edged sword. It's like years ago in the federal government, they talked about the paperless office, and the paper has never gone away. There's just more and more. So it's like social media. Once you figure out Facebook, then you've got to go to Instagram. Once you got that figured out, then you go to Twitter, and then there's TikTok and all these other ones. So it's very difficult to keep up on all that, and it is very difficult to get started. I just changed some settings today for one of my accounts in Google, and I had to watch a video to be able to press the yes, I understand button. It wouldn't let me go any further until I watched a video to make sure that I understood. I still don't know that I understood, but I learned enough so I could press the go button and move on to the screen to then pay them some money. So internal to the club, sure, we can say things like, hey, meet us on the 2-meter repeater Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and we're going to talk about this new subject. And for those that are in the club, they get it. They know how to tune the radio on to the repeater. They know a time, and they're familiar with the other people on the repeater, and they have a chat. But when we talk about new people or people who are new to amateur radio, hey, there's some mic fright. I don't know if I want to transmit because I might make a mistake. So the idea of having a welcoming environment is also very important to public relations and public information. As you know, if you go to a restaurant and you're treated poorly, you're not planning on going back. Some of the same information that you use internally is really good for sharing with other clubs or with the section or with the ARRL itself or other ham radio organizations, because we're all on the same page. But when it gets, you talk more about the idea of the goals. If there are some other goals where other people want to know more about it, make sure that you start at the beginning. I know that I have some goals on some things that I want to do with some mesh networking and Arden and some other activities, and I'm new at it. So I'm definitely going to do a lot of reading and then look for the Elmer to help me out with that here in the near future. When you're talking about the media and the public, as anybody who's tried to go to a school or a business or the city, the county, the state, to say, hey, I've got something that's really interesting. It gets back to the why. Why is the receiver of your information, why are they going to be interested in that? Why are they going to take time away from their day to listen to your message? And then more importantly, do something about it, whether that's sharing that information or taking that information themselves and having some type of action or action item to get involved with amateur radio, get involved with the club, get involved with a public service activity, those types of things. Especially to the external folks and the external groups, the social media can be very helpful, but then it also could be something that is not useful unless you feed the beast. The information needs to go in there. I'm thinking about Facebook specifically. People are going to come look at your page. If it says that you haven't had anything on there for a while, then they might not come back. So at any time, it's a good time to restart with social media. There are people that want to consume the information that you can provide and the club can provide. The other part of making sure that your message can get to the audience and they can understand what you're saying, know that the learning styles, adult learning styles, whether you're a visual person, you need to hear it, you need to read it, you need to put your hands on it, you need to be interactive, or you just need to do it. And it sounds like that's what's going to go on with the trailer training day. It's going to hit all of these adult learning modalities so that everybody can learn how to use the trailer, and then when a disaster happens, if it does impact the county and mark is called out and the trailer's used, then there are going to be a large group of subject matter experts that are going to be ready to help. Okay, just a picture of the antenna system at W7DX in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I'm a member of that remote base club, and I was able to visit it one time with my take-home vehicle. I was out in the Southwest and I decided to visit the station. All right, this public relations, public information, it's something that I do every day. It is something that has grown on me, but I will tell a quick story that when I was at the fire department in the 90s and we had a big house fire and we were able to get there on time. Somebody called 911 early. We got in there, got all the people out, put the fire out, saved the structure. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, the family's dog did not make it. And we got back, we're cleaning up, and we were on the TV. And our fire chief just blew a gasket because the news media didn't talk about the great save or the number of lives saved. They concentrated on talking to somebody who was very upset that their dog died. And the story turned out, instead of lives saved and a structure saved, it was the fire department didn't save the dog. And the fire chief was very upset. And I said, well, did you talk to the media? He said, I don't have time for those people. I really don't. And I said, well, you get what you put into it. And he said, okay, smart guy. And then I was sent to the State Fire Academy to make sure that I came back with some type of public relations, public information certification so that he didn't have to talk to the media anymore. That was my job. So I got involved with it very early. And now that my federal career has ended, I decided last year, because of COVID, when I could not coach, and I coach a lot of sports, that I formulated my own 501c3 non-for-profit sports foundation called American Gold Sports Alliance. And yes, there is a radio division, but the goals and objectives revolve around making opportunities for student athletes and other athletes where perhaps there aren't any. So we look for underrepresented sports, underserved communities, and it's a nationwide effort. So I have to live in this public relations and public information world every day to get my message out, look for donors, look for other partners. And so we're heavily involved on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I still don't know what a TikTok is, but apparently we're there. We're also on YouTube. So it's something that comes up every day, and it's part of my job. Another part of my job is I just signed a contract to be the head wrestling coach at St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Potomac, and also the girls assistant coach on the varsity. We need to build some teams. So I'm going to use some of these same techniques, some of these same ideas that I'm talking about, so I can build my teams there. It's a small school, so I've got to get people engaged, get them excited, and go out for the sports. As it relates to public relations, public information, real estate says location, location, location. So public relations, public information, it's about relationships. Definitely about relationships. Trust is a key factor, especially when you're working with reporters, whether it's television, whether it's print, whether it's online. The trust, so that you provide the right information the first time, they can report it, and then everybody wins. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of the target audience. If you're talking to a bunch of engineers, yes, you can get technical, you can talk about deep into ham radio theory and electronics, but if you're talking to kids at a school, that might be too much, especially when you're first starting out with a relationship. If you're there in the science club, then some of those kids are going to know more. But if you're just trying to get in the school because you have an idea that you want to put on a class, then maybe it's the idea that you need to convince an administrator, a teacher, a club sponsor, and then get the kids on your side. I do this all the time, especially when I'm trying to get a group invigorated about what I'm excited about. I have someone who's a non-amateur radio operator read it to make sure that my feeling that it's great information and excites people is true. And as I mentioned earlier with my acronym jar, there's a lot of acronyms, especially here in the Washington, D.C. area and with federal government, public safety. So make sure that you have some detail. Whether it's verbal, written, or both, you really need to make sure that you explain why the reader should care. so many times, whether it's a police chief, fire chief, somebody from the county, from the city, they need to know why what you're telling them is important to them. Pardon me. All right, well, here's some of the ideas, and we'll get into the conversation part here shortly. What can public relations, public information do to help the club? And some of these things that I came up with, I'm sure there are more. The idea of getting the information out to the membership through many channels, the future activities, attracting future club members, thinking about the served organizations, whether it's the National Weather Service with Skywarn, or whether it's the county with emergency management, fire, EMS, and police. The idea of having a regular relationship with someone who's in the local or regional media. Of course, we're looking back at the section, the ARRL section and headquarters, and then of course the service to citizens. So I've said a lot in a very short amount of time. I'd like to know if there might be some questions, something I can get a little deeper into, perhaps some thoughts. And I'm open for any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns.
Well, thank you. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in your experience, and great presentation, so thank you for that. In your experience working with ARRL, what was the most effective method of reaching, the public, and then also getting new members?
That's a good question, and it comes up on a regular basis. A lot of it is depends on the relationships that already exist. So I know that there are some clubs that have teachers that are amateur radio operators, so it's much easier to get into the schools, or at least get that message into the schools. Of course, most of us know back in the day, if you had something to tell the principal, you just walked in the school and left a business card or a letter or something, and you came back when they had time for your presentation. But now it's a lot different. So the ability to find out the organization that you're trying to make inroads with, find those people. I will say that the good old-fashioned letter, a physical letter that gets sent through the postal service, seems to still get people's attention. The bigger the organization, that seems to be something that still works, because people look at it, maybe they don't understand, maybe they do, and then they put it on to the next level of supervision, leadership, and people look at it. The idea of the membership, and many clubs have had some educational activities. I know that the science fair here was very successful. A lot of people, and Mark was very involved with that. The different technician, general, and extra classes that have been going on in this area. But that is difficult to build the membership, because there's so much for people to do. So just like with other sports, sometimes it takes that ambassador, it takes that champion, and the idea of what works. Kids are going to be different than people in their 20s and people who are over 20. I'll just say that. What makes a club exciting is really up to the club, but it really needs to be put out there. You may never know who sees the message. You may never know who goes to the website, but the idea that there's some excitement, and when people get on the repeater, they hear the nets, they know that there are people who are excited, but how do we get people to get onto those nets? How do we get people to listen in? like I said earlier, the idea that I'm going to have to figure out some ways of getting people to try the sports that I'm going to be coaching. That's going to be difficult because I'm in a new school with a new set of administrators, new leadership. And although I know some of the other coaches, I'm not in the school every day. So I've got to think about some unique ways. So my recommendation would be to try some new things. Maybe take some of the videos from the other presentations. Maybe those get turned into 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute little snippets of information. And then that could be put on the YouTube, that could be put on the Facebook. And because I know a lot of things that I listen to, I like it, so I'm going to listen to it. But I know that some of the presentations recently about emergency management and Oxcom and all kinds of other things, some of those conference calls go on for hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And sometimes it's difficult for me to distill for myself what's important. There's a lot of good information, but it's very difficult. So to think about making the messages very short so that people can see it. Videos of even the trailer day. That's something that when the antenna is getting put up for 40 and 80, and when the ground rods are being knocked in, and what all the other things, those all can be little pieces of training that can interest outside people, but also be part of a training that could go on that people can do, club members can do on their own.
Great suggestion. I actually wrote that down because we can do little snippets of videos on for trailer day on things like grounding and things like, elevating the mast and things that don't take a lot of time. They just need to know how it works. And if you show that on a video, it's probably the best way. So that's excellent. Thank you very much.
Right.
So are there any other questions there? I'm sorry, you were going to say, Sid. I cut you off.
Yeah, oh, no, it's okay. The idea of finding ways to break the barriers so that people can be successful is very important. And I'll just share another quick story. Cricket, the sport of cricket, is the second most popular sport in the world. And as part of my non-for-profit, I started to get involved with cricket. And so I went to the Maryland State Cricket Association and said, hey, I want to be an umpire. I umpire Australian rules football and wrestling and all kinds of other things. But I said, I want to be a cricket official. So they put me through the training, and I will tell you that I had the cricket officials version of Mike Fright when I officiated my first game. I had no confidence. I know that I watched all the videos and I passed numerous tests, and I got out there and I thought, oh my gosh, these 10-year-olds were just going to eat me up. I'm going to make all the wrong calls. They'll hate me forever. And it turned out okay. But it's just like Mike Fright. Think about, it's always great on the nets to hear somebody say, this is my first check-in. Well, I can almost guarantee that's not the first time they ever heard the net. That's the first time they got over that, pressing that button and giving their call sign. And that's a good thing to have on the net, because the net controls for Mark, very nice. They welcome newcomers. And I know that if something happens on the net and there's a little issue, that they definitely send him an email, call him up and say, hey, next time do this. So the ability to, whatever the goal objective that the club has, the idea of making it easy for people to participate. Hate that COVID happened, but think of all the information that gets shared on Zoom now, and that normally wouldn't happen. I'm more active in some of my long distance clubs just because I can get on and participate. I did a call at noon for the Potomac Valley Radio Club and talked to a bunch of people. My Southwest Ohio DX Association, I get on their calls. So the ability to use tools like this is going to be very important also, especially because there's still an issue with hanging out together at the clubhouse.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think a big reason that our club is still functioning and thriving, not just surviving, but thriving, is Zoom. I mean, the modern technology, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we'd be back at the cafeteria, but I don't think we've missed a step. In fact, I think it's better because we can include more people from outside the immediate area. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so are there any more questions before we call it an evening?
Alyssa has a question.
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to ask your thoughts on, as a club, like what sort of jobs do you think are important for doing PR for the club? Like, are there certain types of tasks that you recommend that the club have, or jobs? I'd love to help in some way, and especially in this area, because I have some background in it. So just wondering what kind of tasks you think there are.
Well, the care and feeding of the social media would be important. And sometimes it's just looking at an amateur radio related story or a technology related story or a public service story that you find interesting. Other people are going to be interested in that. And so if somebody from the club, say, could post that on the Facebook page and start getting some traction there, that would be interesting, because not only is it the club, but also if the person who found it put their call sign on there, then the readers can see who found that interesting. And I think about the beauty of amateur radio, although sometimes it's a solution looking for a problem, the idea that there's so many facets to amateur radio. And there are people in this club that are part of the straight key century club. We've got people who are DXers. We've got people who like to rag chew on HF, experimenters. But right now, the idea of we're still kind of in our bubbles in our homes, and we can't have the casual conversations that happen before the meeting, and then at the break, and then after the meeting, and maybe somebody goes out and gets coffee. Those don't happen. But if they know that the club's interested in something or finds a certain story interesting, that could be one way of sharing what you find interesting, but also alerting others that there's somebody else that likes that too. I think of county hunting, for example. That might be of interest to somebody. But there could be the idea of people who don't want the high pressure of being on the repeater during the Sunday night or Tuesday night nets, but they'd like to operate the repeater. There could be an opportunity, a new person's net. Maybe it happens on a certain night or one time a month, but those kinds of things. So the ability to find those stories, share them, and that also could be something that the reflector, if you could post that to the reflector and other people are going to know. I looked at the list yesterday of all the different email addresses of club members, and that's quite a list. There's a lot of people who are on that reflector. So whether it's asking a question and getting some help, or putting out, maybe you've got something that you think is amateur radio related that's part of your day job, and you just want to throw that out there, that could be interesting. That's another way that information can be passed. So just a couple thoughts there.
Thank you.
Okay, great question, Alyssa. Thank you. All right.
Looks like Fred's got a question.
Yes, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I was curious. I know I sort of see it sometimes because of the membership stuff, but I've also noticed this just in general over the years, that there are a number of new hams. You hear them on the repeater, maybe for a year or so, and then they sort of just vanish. Now, I know that this particular area is a very transient area, so I'm sure you get a lot of young people who started out when they're just finishing up high school and then end up leaving the area going to college. But I remember meeting some people where I worked even that, a man and his wife both got into the hobby, and within a year, it was like I never heard from them again. Is that, I'm not sure if that's a problem that individual clubs can sort of tackle, or is that a problem with the hobby in general? and the ARRL can help with that more. That, you know, it's kind of like one coworker of mine always refers to it as like his beanie baby of the month. You know, there's always a new beanie baby comes out and then you forget about the old one. So I'm just kind of curious if you're seeing this just beyond our area, since you're involved with some of these other things on a larger scale.
I would say that's a problem everywhere. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, I was very involved with the state of California and the community emergency response team and the recruitment and retention of members. And I was specifically trying to help them with the telecommunications people. So not just amateur radio operators, but also the professional folks, and then the people that are using the family service radios and neighborhood watch and things like that. And just like at the fire department, even today, if you don't train, if you don't drill, you don't exercise, then it gets old. And maybe you forget some of those very important steps. So some of the CERT teams, community emergency response teams, have their regular meetings, but then they also have a meeting where it's all hands on. There's no business, there's no discussion of big events, old news, new news, but it's something that's hands on. And I know that one of the most interesting exercises, and it's been a while, but the idea of everybody going on simplex and having exercise where everybody sees who else they can reach in case there was an emergency and the repeater was down, or other activities where somebody just says, hey, I've got a new antenna, and of course it's a COVID thing, but once we're back to normal, hey, I've got this new antenna, I'm going to bring it in, show and tell. But I would say I don't even know if it's really an amateur radio only. I think there's just so much to do these days, whether you're a teenager or an adult. But I want to say that people are going to prioritize their time. And if they, in their mind, can say, okay, well, I'm a young person. I was told that if I got on the CERT team and got my amateur radio license, that maybe I could be a police officer or a firefighter someday, or that I could learn CPR and then maybe become a nurse or a doctor. When they see the path and when they can see that they're making a difference, the levels of participation seem to grow. But when it's something where it's just the same old thing with the same old people, and then especially new folks, if they don't make good relationships, good friendships with some of the people in a club, then they tend to find something else to do. It's always, I try to mentor people with getting their amateur radio license, but I also, those new people, I put a reminder about every 3 months, 6 months, I try to contact them and I ask them what they did with amateur radio. And unfortunately, yes, many of them say, oh, well, you know, I went back to school, or I got a new job, or I moved. And so that's difficult. But I would say from my experience, especially with the ARRL, action, something to do. But as we know, and it's not just an amateur radio thing, there are a lot of people who do, and there are a lot of people who are on the sidelines. So we need to get some of those people off the sidelines and get them to help grow the club. I've been participating more and more the last few months because I'm interested now that I don't have this national responsibility. I want to see how I can help out here in Montgomery County, in Maryland, and the DMV. So thanks, Fred. And Fred, you and
I hate.
you and Al might be my record for the people I've known the longest here.
Yeah, we've all been around for a while. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember you guys used to come to the meetings when we were still over in the cafeteria, the executive office building. It was a long time ago.
yes.
Yeah.
I can hit a 9-iron from my front yard to the cafeteria, so good. All right, any other thoughts, any other questions? And I didn't look to see if there was anything in the chat box. Nope, don't see anything there. Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody joining me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have a little presentation here. Alex, thank you very much. And I don't see Al on here, but maybe he popped in. But thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to say hi and tell everybody a little bit about me and what's been keeping me busy with amateur radio. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sid. And I wrote down furiously some of your great information and hints, and all very useful. You know, it's like you said, you know, and Fred said, it's, you know, you can get the people. Well, getting the people is one challenge. Keeping the people is another challenge. And so we have to constantly work at both those things. So your information is very timely and very valuable. So thank you very much.
Good.
All right. Well, that's it for tonight, everybody.